This is Soccer 101 with Moon and Rocchio.
Welcome back to Soccer 101. My name is Moon. That is Matt Rocchio. We are having a good time celebrating a win. Finally, a nice, good, solid win here in the MLS for St. Louis City SC last weekend. We're going to talk about last weekend's game, this weekend's game, and then, of course, the controversy continues with the U.S. Open Cup. Disaster, shall we say disaster, Rocchio?
Yeah, I think it's fair to call it a disaster at this point with how fans are reacting around the United States. And honestly, I think it's been a good time for some education, because I think there are some fans who are, newer MLS fans who don't understand why there is a contingent of fans who are so angry about this. And so I think it was a kind of a good way to educate fans onto why these midseason tournaments, why they happen in soccer, first of all, but also why certain ones like the U.S. Open Cup are so important to the foundation of soccer in the United States.
Yeah, it is a big deal. But let's start with last weekend. Last weekend, St. Louis City SC got all 3 points in match day 2, defeating New York City FC. Now, we kind of predicted this. New York City FC is kind of garbage. They really didn't have too many. I'm just speaking honestly.
Yeah. Don't hold back, baby. Don't hold back.
We didn't really expect them to be much of a force, and they were worse than expected, to be honest, which was good. I think it's really good for Berkey to get a clean sheet, even if it's against a garbage team.
Yep.
He still had to make plenty of moves. Good God, he saved 1 or 2 that never should have been on his hands. But, he was able to save the defense from a fairly lackluster performance, if I do say so myself. Again, no creativity really from New York City FC. They had a couple people cut through, though. Berkey deserved the clean sheet. I'm glad that he got it. It was a 2-0 win, and I think Celio was the man of the match. If he wasn't, he should have been.
Yeah, goal and assist, Celio Pompeo was the man of the match, and you really kind of highlighted a couple big things. Before we go back completely, I do want to highlight your conversation about the defense, because earlier today, Bradley Carnell joined the opening drive on 101 ESPN. It was a great interview. Go back and listen to it after you're done listening here to us here on Soccer 101. But one of the things he mentioned was, he said that they could have built, or that they were building multiple statues of Roman Berkey across the first 4 games of the season because of how much they were leaning on him to save the defense. And I did think you definitely saw that. I do, though, want to highlight one part of the defense, which was, I would have to say, if you picked 4 players that you can highlight from that New York City FC game, the first 2 big ones are going to be Celio Pompeo, your man of the match, Samuel Adeniran, your other goal scorer. But the other 2 that I think are just as important, that we talk about a lot of them, is Edu Leuven and Joachim Nilsson. And I really do think Joachim Nilsson showed a lot of impressive play against New York City FC. He still was dealing with a little bit of a tight groin. He's pretty much 100% now going into Austin. So he was dealing with a tight groin. And yet there were a lot of times where he was legging out a run against a New York City striker, and he was winning those matches. And there was one where he almost did the splits to kind of reach forward and tag a ball away from a striker. And considering he had a pulled groin, that was an incredible play from Nilsson. There was a lot of pumping up about Nilsson from Carnell last year. He said that, once we get him in healthy and into the system, he's going to be one of the best defenders in the MLS. And we didn't see it last year. And that's why he didn't even play both of the playoff games against Sporting Kansas City. But last weekend against New York City FC, I think, was the first time you really saw every part of his game that made Bradley Carnell say that, because that was a very impressive performance from Joachim Nilsson.
I think you're right. I think he's going to be a solid piece to this team. And going back to Berkey, listen, there are some. If you take the average, the mean of goalies in the MLS, it's a pretty good goalie. Like there's a lot of good goalies in the league. But I'll tell you what, if we don't have Berkey, this team isn't performing like we want them to, or saw last year. Berkey is one of the few world-class keepers in this league, and without him, this would be a completely different city with a completely different spirit towards this. And I am not overstating that. I'm telling you, the world-class goalie, even if it's just a save or 2 here and there, it is the absolute difference between a defense letting down a team and paying the price for it fully week after week, and is still coming away with 2 points or a point. If Berkey wasn't in there, this game we could have shared points. We may even have lost this. It changes the entire complexion of every single aspect of the team, having a world-class keeper like Berkey in there.
Absolutely. And one of the big parts about the game was, from the get-go, Moon, the press was just at a different level. And I think you saw a little bit of what City wants their press to be. It's a little bit higher up the field. It's a little bit more extreme than it was last year, obviously, as you're dialing that in across a season of training and bringing in new guys and getting those guys acclimated to your system. And I think we saw it a lot in the first half against Houston in the win here at City Park, but then we didn't see it in the next two games. And then we finally came back around to another MLS matchup, and we saw it again at City Park. The press was absolutely incredible, I thought, against New York City FC. I wasn't the only one. I'm going to go to the press conference that City had on Thursday. This is Edu Löwen talking about how they got back to their game this past weekend against New York City FC.
I think we took the right conclusions out of the game in Houston. The way we pressed wasn't good. So we had a lot of meetings with the strikers, meetings with the defensive players, and we were talking everything through. We are holding each other accountable. So everybody was like also very open and very honest to talk everything through, what everybody needs to do better. And at one hand, it was depressing because like in the Houston game, we weren't ourselves, and we wanted to show our real face against New York City again. And there were many other things that we were analyzing, and as I said, we took the right conclusions. But that's also like a lot of talking, a lot of analyzing, but then in the end of the day you have to bring it on a pitch, and in the end of the day that's what we did.
Hey, can I say something about off the field stuff? Because we'll get into stats here in a second. You guys know I've given Löwen a lot of stuff. Let's say this: I've put a lot of pressure on Löwen.
You have, but
I'm so appreciative that he is so good with media. I'm so appreciative. Listen, this is a new sport in the professional realm to a lot of people in St. Louis, and the last thing we need is the lack of a handful of people that are good at media that can really speak to the game, make it simple, be understandable. Other than some of the south of the border players in the MLB, Americans, especially St. Louisans, we're used to pretty basic, understandable, decent at media sort of athletes talking up the sport. And when we have a lot of new eyes on this kind of stuff, I am so very appreciative that we have somebody like Bradley Carnell, we have somebody like Lutz, we have somebody like Löwen, we have all these guys that are really good in the press. They make it in the media, they make it clear, they make it honest, and they make it good. So praises to Löwen for not only that, bit of media there, but just in general. So I wanted to get that off my chest because I know that people think I hate the guy. I don't. I just have a lot of pressure on him because he's wearing our number 10, and he's a key point to this game on and off the field. And
the team puts a lot of pressure on him, so it's not unreasonable for us to ask the same thing of Edu Löwen, as fans or media people, that the team asks of him, and they ask a lot of him, and I like that answer just because it was exactly what you wanted to hear, which was an acknowledgement that it maybe wasn't a tactical mistake against Houston. It was an effort and a mindset thing, and I hate being the one that says that. I will never come on this podcast and tell you that what I saw for City's biggest issue was that no one cared, or that they didn't have the effort, because I can't diagnose that just watching the game. But when you hear them talk about the mentality, and you hear Carnell talk about bravery and want to, those kind of things tell you that this team has the talent. They just weren't playing up to their game the way they know how. And that was the big difference from the get-go against New York City FC. They were in their game. The press was active. Every player was in the game from the get-go. And it was just a cleaner game. And Löwen, if we want to take away from mentality after talking about what he said, but just watching his game, that's a guy who was 70% the games before and was 100% against New York City FC because his ball control was a lot better. He was flinging passes all over the place, and they were connecting with other players. They were putting together multiple progressive passes in the same sequence without turning the ball over. It was a completely different team from what we had seen in the three games before. But if you go back to, the best version of City we saw last season, it was just it was like an 110% version of that. And in fact, Bradley Carnell said, I think he said it after the game as well, but he said it this morning again on 101 ESPN. That was probably the best game they have played in their existence as a club up to this point. And I really thought that was a very impressive game. And it wasn't just because of the young players like Sam and Celio, huge part about it, But this shows that when this team has their best players, Lowen Nilsson on the back line, Edward Lowen in the middle, when those guys are playing their game, it's a completely different team than what we saw fail out against Houston.
Yeah, it's got to be clean. It's got to be fast. It's got to be focused. And we got to have players that really know, that have a high soccer IQ and aren't trying to do too much. And I feel like Lowen was delivering more of what he's supposed to do and not do too much. Hey, let's talk to the people that maybe watched and got into the excitement last year, and they haven't necessarily caught these two first MLS matches or maybe any of the other drama that's going on. Let me encourage you to go on Apple TV Plus, watch the highlights. I think they condense it down to like 7 or 10 minutes, something like that. Watch the highlights from this week just to kind of get your bearings back and see the team sort of performing at a pretty decent level. And watch this match coming up here this weekend in Austin. This is an away match, 7:30 start though, like usual. So that'll make it easy. Just a little bit of stats from the last game that went against New York City FC. Well, Sam scored his second goal of the MLS season. I believe that's his 10th MLS goal total. Let's see. We had Berkey. That was his first clean sheet of the season.
And I want to say, this is the first clean sheet for City in the last 9 games played. So that goes back to 2023, obviously. So, I mean, that was a big thing for this defense to shut out a team again.
Yeah, for sure. I'm trying to keep it positive here, Rocchio. I didn't even realize that. I try not to write down the negative things down anymore. City SC are 11-0-1 when scoring the first goal at City Park. Keep that in mind. That's a big stat. If they score the first goal, they are in the stat ball to win that game during regular season play. Now City SC moved to 2-0-1 at City Park for 2024 and are now 15-5-3 as a home team across all competitions in these last 2 years. That's a great record. It's a great home record. Of course, I say that as we were about to discuss an away match against Austin. Now, Austin was supposed to be one heck of a team last year. Remember, that was the first team that we ever faced in regulation play here. And last year they were supposed to be great, and they had the pieces on paper to be great. St. Louis performed excellently against a really good Austin FC team that ended up letting down their expectations, the MLS's expectations, and their fans last year overall. But I don't see them being a pushover like New York City FC this week. It's going to be a harder match. You're going down into their house. And what do you think of Austin, Rocchio?
I think this is a good matchup for St. Louis because of the timing, which is the fact that right now Austin FC does not have Sebastian Driussi. And Sebastian Driussi is far and away their best player. Was their leading goal scorer from last year. He is their best player, especially for a team that did not add offensively, and only real additions this past offseason were defensively. And they needed those defensive additions. There's no doubt about that. But this offense right now is anemic without Driussi, and he's questionable going into this game. And as we kind of saw with a Lowen Nilsson or an Edu Lowen, if a guy hasn't been playing yet this season and he doesn't have any training time under his belt, questionable is being, I think, charitable right now for Sebastian Driussi. I really do not see a situation where he plays any more than maybe the last 25 minutes of this game. So right now, Austin FC's offense is completely down in the dumps. And so this is a perfect time for City to strike. You get lucky. You get the away game against Austin at this point when they do not have their best player. So go down there, and this lines up where you got to win this one. You can't lean on another bad back pass like you did to get your first win of the season last year. Again, they're not, like you're saying, they're not what they were 2 years ago. They're working their way back. They shouldn't be as bad as last year, but this start is not a good start for Austin. This should be a win for City out of the gate.
Yeah, I hope so. So last year we beat them 3-2 in that very first inaugural MLS campaign, and that was at Austin's house. Now, when they came back, we smashed them 6-3, and with that, Lowen, who we were just talking about, he has the most assists. He holds the record for most assists against Austin FC, and I believe that's with 5. So he is statistically performing very well against this team. I hope you're right. I hope Driussi doesn't play. That guy is freaking so spectacular.
It would shock me if he played at this point.
Yeah, and without them, they lost to Minnesota United FC in their season opener 2-1. I don't know much about Minnesota United, but Austin.
They didn't have their head coach yet.
Should have beat them.
Their new head coach, coming from Manchester United, had to finish off his duties at United before he could join Minnesota United FC to start the season. So they didn't have their head coach for the game or leading up to the game. You lost 2-1. You were the only team that dropped your home game to open the MLS season. Yes, you just legged out a very difficult 0-0 draw against the Sounders, but as the crew on MLS.com did a great job of pointing this out, I'm actually going to play a little clip later on from Kalen Carr, Matt Doyle, Sasha Klistan, and Jillian Sakovits. They talked about how they have that right now Austin has 11 shots this season. And 9 of them came as they were trying to come back against Minnesota United, which means only 2 of those shots came actually against Seattle when you legged out a 0-0 draw. So it's like they were pushing the pace and really making anything happen against Seattle because it was in Seattle. And again, they do not have a good offense right now, and they had lost their opening game. They were just trying to leg out 1 point from 90 minutes, and they did it. But you can't leg out 1 point in 90 minutes against St. Louis City SC. Not if the press is doing anything like it was doing against New York City FC this past year.
I hope you're right. I just know that Austin, in these last 2 seasons, has had a lot to prove. Prove. I got a feeling they're going to come out real hard because they maybe feel like they have nothing to lose, especially if Driussi's not out there. Somebody's going to be trying to step up. I just don't want to underestimate anybody and go into this. Now, what did Kleshtin say? Because he's usually kind of up on Austin. Was he kind of down on him for a little bit there?
He was actually down on Austin, talking about their anemic offense. I don't have that part of the clip because if you go to MLSsoccer.com, they did a great 2 or 3 minute breakdown about this matchup, and it was about Austin's anemic offense and MLS's strong offense. And I am going to play the second half of that clip because they did talk about the City offense right now, and they threw out some numbers as to why you should be worried. But your boy Sasha, I think you're going to like his answer. Here's the crew from MLS.com, Kalen, Matt, Sasha, and Jillian.
One team that is generating goals is St. Louis City. 2-0 win over New York City FC. What'd you see in that one?
Our number is plus 1.6. That's the expected goal over performance from St. Louis City through 2 games this year, which is actually ahead of the pace that they hit last year, which was ridiculous. It was like the highest expected goal over performance in the American Soccer Analysis database history, which goes back a dozen seasons, and they're outperforming it through 2 games. It's crazy to think that they're doing again. I feel like they have to regress, but I've been saying that for a year now.
Yeah, it's starting to seem disrespectful, but yet it's our question. They overperforming, Sasha?
I'm selling that. I like this St. Louis team. I like the style of play, and I think they have good players all over the field. When I think about Lowen, Aziel Jackson really coming on in the attack now. I love the way he turns and faces the defense and asks questions of the defense. And Sam Adeniran just looks like a bowling ball that cannot be stopped when he joins the attack.
Yeah, Kleshtin. Yeah, you're right, dude. And it is starting to sound disrespectful. Thank you for pointing that out. It is starting to sound disrespectful. You stupid jackasses are constantly like, I wasn't expecting this. I wasn't expecting this. Like, we won the Western Conference last year. How are you not expecting something? This is absurd. This is absurd, especially in a league with bad defenses. Start talking about that.
Matt, really quickly, to Matt Doyle's point, last year, St. Louis City outscored their goal differential, XG goal differential, by 24.5 goals. The 1.6, if you extrapolate it across the whole season, he's correct. Right now, they would outscore their XG by 27.2 goals. So Matt Doyle's numbers aren't wrong, but I agree with you. It is starting to sound a little disrespectful.
Yeah, get out of here. The only time that we were worried about St. Louis's offense is when Klaus got injured the first time last year. After about 2 games where he sat, we weren't even worried about it. We had people stepping up all over the place. So stop talking about our offense. Expect a lot from our offense. What we're all worried about is our defense. That's the only thing that we're worried about here, going in Austin or going into anywhere. As long as we can shore up some sort of solid and confident and focused and capable defense, this is a team that should be winning things. And that's what we're going to expect. That is what we expect. And they need to start putting some respect on it.
Before we jump into the next thing, I want to talk about really quickly, just I'm going to update everybody on the injuries, by the way. Rasmus Alm, it looks like he's going to travel. I do not know if he's going to play. It looks like almost guaranteed that he's going to play should once it comes up against the LA Galaxy here in a couple weeks. But right now the question is whether or not Rasmus Alm is going to play this week. I think there's a good chance we might see him for a few minutes. some not so good news. Josh Yaro's out. It does not look like Hebert's ready to go either. So, and it also looks like Jabul Blom is out as well. So there is still a little bit of thinness on the back line. Obviously, having Parker and Nilsson healthy with full weeks of training and rest is good to go. So that's your injury update kind of going into this the Austin FC game. You have your back line. You might get Rasmus Alm. So not great in that you don't have a lot of depth still in the back line, but overall I do think they should be, on the front foot against an Austin team that, unlike City, is missing some key players.
Yeah, I hope so. Well, let's just end the Austin talk with, listen, if we go in there, like you said, this is a perfect opportunity for our back line to get some confidence, a perfect opportunity for them to hold some shape, like feel good about whatever it is, and then move on to the next match. Maybe we get Berkey another clean sheet. I hope he doesn't have to work too hard for it. I'm not worried about our offense. I'm only worried about our defense. Let's beat Austin. I predict a 2. Ooh, you know what? I'm going to stay positive. I'm going to say 2-0.
Okay, there you go. I like that. I think 2-0 makes a lot of sense. Before we wrap up here with some news on the U.S. Open boycott going on, I did want to play one more clip from City earlier this week, which was Bradley Carnell was asked. I don't know if you listened to the broadcast this past week, but Danny Higginbotham was on the broadcast, and he compared City SC to his old Stoke City teams back in the mid-2000s because was the team that you never wanted to play, the team that nobody wanted to play.
I have a Stoke City jersey from that era. I loved watching that squad.
So Bradley Carnell was asked about that comparison, and I think you're going to love his answer. Here's Bradley Carnell earlier this week talking about the comparison of St. Louis City to the old Stoke City sides.
It's very complimentary and very flattering. And we're just trying to develop, not just players. We're trying to develop people here along their journeys, right? And I've always said, the people in this building far outweigh the talent, and that's not a knock on the talent because I feel we have very talented players, right? But the people aspect is always first for us. The character aspect is always first for us. And the players that we have here believe in this team identity, the team culture. And then there's a game model that looks and feels like us, and what does that look and feel like? Well, the city of St. Louis, the people of St. Louis, they're grinders, they're workers. And that's what we do. That's what we want to do. And people who come into this building, places where we go and play, we always seem to bring out the best versions of those teams because they can't take a breath. They can't take a pause, right? So we like to control that chaos and make it predictable with all these, with our game model philosophy, tactics, all these things come into play that makes it look like unbearable for the opponent. And, if we suffocate the opponent in many different areas, we'll be competitive and we'll win games. But right now we're trying to do both.
Dude, that's such a cool comparison. I never would have thought of that, but that was such a fun era, man. You had Sidibe, you had Peter Crouch was over there for a bit. I can see that.
And they were held to play.
Yeah, and same for like the Everton squads and all that. That's when they're like the mid-table for the EPL was just a really exciting place. And you know what? I think it's kind of back there now. Unfortunately, United is kind of flirting with mid-table stuff. But yeah, man, anytime you're going to be compared to some of those like heyday teams, that's a beautiful thing. Never an insult. Wonderful. We should be a scary place. I mean, that's what the supporter groups and the supporter sections have always tried to make. These games in this last season, season plus is a scary, intimidating, loud, fun. But very intimidating place and not a super, listen, we're super welcoming. We'll take you out to dinner. Thanks for coming into town to watch your team lose to City SC. But, we don't want this to be the most friendly park. We want it to be scary and loud.
Was that answer, because at the very beginning of this season of Soccer 101, we kind of talked about the big things we were expecting. And your big thing was that kind of the combination of culture of the city and the team. And I think Carnell directly talked about that, the style of the team reflecting the mindset of City. Is Carnell's answer? Are you starting to feel more of that connection between the culture of the club and the culture of the region?
I don't know yet. I feel like we were on a good pace for it last year, and this the product on the field has been lacking these last couple of weeks, and it's kind of like given us a little bit of a boot in the face. A little bit of some sobering, if you will. We were pretty drunk. We were pretty intoxicated.
You're not wrong.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
we've
you're
been pretty
You're
intoxicated on everything. So like, we're kind of letting the dust settle a little bit. So I can't answer that with a full affirmative yet. But that's okay. That's okay. It's
a process.
Yeah,
it's
not a bad
never
thing.
going to happen fast. It's got to be organic too. You can't manufacture it, with a linear process. It's going to happen, in leaps and bounds, and it's going to fall back a little bit sometimes when you have a few bad weeks when it doesn't feel like this team has that same mindset. Then you're going to make big jumps when it seems like they do.
Yeah, well, as it develops, we'll find that yin and the yang in the field. The product on the field will influence the product off the field, and the product off the field will, in turn, influence the stuff on the field. And we'll find our way. But I definitely see this city becoming a team with a real personality, a club, and an environment with a real personality that pushes the product on and off the field to be more and to stay in line and demand a lot. Listen, we're going to have a team here for decades upon decades. Is it going to be the best team every single year? Of course not. But when it's not, our fans, hopefully, there really is a spirit, a single-minded spirit that's developed over these first couple seasons that demands and pushes back on the product on the field and vice versa. So I think that's what's kept the Cardinals just on top these last 30, 40 years. I mean, think about the 90s Cardinals and some of the letdown years. Like, my mother was still in the stands every day as if it was a freaking playoff game.
Yeah,
and there was a spirit built there in the early days, throughout the 80s, and it continued. And the Cardinals have had a rough go, but diehard Cardinals fans aren't just going away. They're involved, they're pissed off, they're loud because they're demanding a lot from the field product. And that's a St. Louis thing. We're humble, happy people that are still boisterous and demand a lot.
You're right about that. One more thing. I was fascinated. I was enraptured by the Champions Cup action still going on. Obviously, St. Louis City not involved anymore, but a fascinating game last night. FC Cincinnati falls in a home game against their CONCACAF Champions Cup opponent. That was an incredibly close game. DeAndre Yedlin, who had recently arrived with a trade from Miami, was active in that game. They're now down because they lost the game, and it was a home game, so they got that away goal tiebreaker going against them. So FC Cincinnati's in a little bit of a spot. And speaking of being in a spot, I mean, Nashville looks like they had Miami dead to rights. But then again, you can never forget that Miami has Lionel Messi, and although he looks like he's operating with a broken hip and four mechanical limbs, Luis Suarez still is able to get the job done.
He's still better than 60% of the folks out there.
That was a fascinating game. I felt for Nashville. That was a rough one. Obviously, Miami's just seems to be inevitable, but also just some other MLS news from the week. I tell you what, man, this league is not stopping. I mean, you have Nashville, first of all, who locks down Hani Mukhtar to an extension. Charlotte FC brings in a DP from the Scottish Premier League, an Israeli player who's worth $8 million on the freaking market. You got new goalies coming in all the time this year with Hugo Lloris and things like that. I mean, team again, FC Cincinnati goes and grabs Yedlin from Miami, and I honestly think that as a full squad, take away the very top of Miami, and FC Cincinnati is a better team than them, and they just got even better with Yedlin on the right side. I mean, teams are not sitting on their laurels in the MLS. Every team every year seems to just take a little bit more of a jump, and that's why it's when you see City make moves, you're encouraged, but also at the same time you got to keep in the back of your head of the other teams in this league, the other top teams in this league are always making moves. The fact that Charlotte FC can go out there and drop $8 million to try to grab a guy who's going to be a key cog on their team for the next 4 or 5 years before they sell him for $40 million to Europe. That's one hell of a move, and City's doing well, but it kind of shows you it's a constant thing where everything's got to be moving, everything's got to be going forward, or else you do, like you pointed out, the 90s with the Cardinals, you are going to have some down years, and you can't afford that right now.
Yep, I agree with you. And then the last puzzle piece that really changes when everything is moving forward are the defenders, the star defenders and the superstar defenders. That's going to be the last piece here.
No one ever talks about them. I love that you focus on the defenders because
that is what will separate our league. Suarez would never be able to do what he's going to do here in any other league on the planet, in any other top league in the planet.
And that's what's fascinating to me, because how often is there a situation where an $8 million young star winger is going to make an impact, as opposed to maybe getting like $2 million center backs. Like those two center backs are going to be a bigger impact on the whole of your team than that one 19-year-old winger is going to be. But everyone always wants to talk about the 19-year-old winger and not the center backs. You're right. That's the key right there.
It's going to be an interesting strategy on how each team it keeps up. But I mean, the reason LAFC started doing what they're doing is because they have talent all over the field. But what did they do? They brought in an aging but still an absolute star of a defender, and he made all the difference in that backfield these last couple seasons. Let's move on. I gotta take my son some
one last thing really quick, and I just want to say credit to the supporters groups of City for continuing with their boycott for the Leagues Cup. Obviously, yes. I think it makes a lot of sense. The connection between the U.S. Open Cup and the Leagues Cup, and the schedule congestion, and the fact that they don't control the money for the Leagues Cup, the MLS, but they do control the money for the Leagues Cup, and that kind of seems to send a lot of the messages and the history of it. So good on them for that boycott. We'll be supporting them. I haven't decided whether or not I'm going to go down and actually cover those games. I enjoy anytime I have access to the players, and I don't know if I want to sacrifice that. But at the same time, I feel like some solidarity is owed to those supporters groups for how hard they work and how hard they've been working since the St. Louis FC days. So there's a good chance that I might be joining them down there, Moon, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. The other news is that there hasn't been a lot of news about the ref strike right now. Something that's fascinating to me is two things. One, there was a leak last week that the MLS is telling their broadcasters not to talk about the ref strike too much. They don't want them to get bogged down when there is a missed call and be mentioning it too much. I think that shows a lot of cowardice from the MLS. They're obviously trying to play the PR game, and I understand that. But what's fascinating to me is that both the NWSL and the USL are going to start up here in the next week or two. They also use the referees from the Professional Soccer Referee Association, and they have separate deals, and they're going to be playing with those referees. So it's another sign of a knock against the MLS that your lower leagues can figure this out, but you again cannot, despite the fact that you have all the money coming in, and again you have even more money coming in with your Leagues Cup. Figure it out, get them better flights, get them better scheduled, get them better pay. This isn't that hard. Eventually, a game is going to be ruined and it's going to make national news because of the replacement refs. It hasn't happened yet, but that will happen, and that's the last thing that MLS needs publicly right now.
Yep, it's a wild time, but it's a beautiful sport, and it's an exciting game on and off the field. That's why we cover it here on Soccer 101. Rocchio, I want to thank you, and everybody listening. Thank you for subscribing. Make sure you are sharing the podcast and subscribing and enjoying these episodes. Thank you for being here with us. This has been another fun episode of Soccer 101. As St. Louis SC travels down to Texas this weekend, we would like to see a good, solid goal!